In Luke 12:32-40, Jesus continues to encourage living the kingdom way. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give alms. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven, where no thief comes near, no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Be dressed for action and have your lamps lit. Be like those who are waiting for their master to return to the wedding banquet, so that they may open the door for him as soon as he comes and knocks. Blessed are those slaves whom the master finds alert when he comes. Truly I tell you, he will fasten his belt and have them sit down and eat, and he will come to serve them. If he comes during the middle of the night or near dawn and finds them so, blessed are those slaves. But know this, if the owner of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would have not let his house be broken into. You must also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour. The word of life. Thanks be to God.
Thanks, Becky. So now we have a couple of moving parts here, a treasure and words about faith. And I invite you to listen to these two stories that have to do with faith, one about being prepared, and the other about not really knowing where your efforts will go, and yet a treasure inside. Listen with that kind of ear. The first story is an excerpt from Old Faithful and the Waiting Slaves by Reverend Dr. Janet H. Hunt of Dancing with the Word, and she's talking about a visit to Yellowstone National Park. She said, I ventured into Yellowstone National Park for the first time last week. I had flown into the area for an event, and it was a really short period of time that I would be there, so my time to visit these things was short. I traveled to participate in a retreat, and most of it was there. I couldn't linger very long to see the things that everyone else there was seeing. Even so, as I made my way back out of the park on Thursday, I decided to detour and try and catch Old Faithful before I had to leave. Even in July, the traffic had not been bad before that, but it was backed up as I drove towards the parking lot. I pulled in, grabbed my bag, and headed in the same direction as all the other tourists seemed to be going. When I got close, though, it appeared that the geyser had just erupted and wasn't due to do so again for another hour or so. I can almost hear her going, rats. So I thought about passing on the experience, but it was early enough that I could still get out of the park before dark, so I walked back, found myself an early supper, and when I returned to the viewing area for Old Faithful, it was already packed with others like me. Even though I was a half hour early, all the seating was taken. So I stood between some benches and with the crowd found myself staring at a hole in the ground. And after a while, a murmur went up as the crowd saw a puff of steam. Along with all the rest, I held my camera phone high over my head, not wanting to miss the chance to see it, even if I couldn't see it. And then it stopped. And then there was another of steam. And then nothing. A few gurgles of water bubbled up next, and then it was quiet again. And those around me began to speculate that perhaps Old Faithful was teasing us a little. And those accompanied by small children were doing all they could to keep them entertained while we watched and waited. We were all together in that place for nearly an hour before the geyser fully erupted. It came about 20 minutes later than the clock in the nearby shop had indicated it would. Still, just as it has for hundreds of years or more, it keeps more of a schedule than any other geyser in the park or perhaps anywhere in the world. And just as millions before had done so, together we witnessed something remarkable. Says Janet, the images Jesus offers today speak to us of the kind of expectation I observed in myself and others that afternoon gathered around a geyser. like those slaves waiting for their master to return. We were hyper alert with cameras of all sorts at the ready, and mostly we believed that it would come, relying as we were on the witness of millions who had gone before and the clock in the office. But unlike those slaves awaiting the bridegroom so very long ago, I don't know how many of us would have been willing to wait all night to witness this wonder of nature. But we were willing to wait a while. The second is a more ancient story in some ways. I had the privilege of being able to see these monuments I'll talk about next. In Ireland's Boyne Valley stand two monuments, Newgrange and Knowth, also known as passage tombs. They are surrounded by Neolithic art carved on what they call curbstones that weigh anywhere from 1 to 10 tons. The carving and those stones surround these passage tombs. They have spirals and lozenges and chevrons and triangles and parallel lines and arcs carved into them. These are massive stones. It is known as the greatest concentration of megalithic art in Europe. And some of those dramatic signs capture our imagination because we're thinking, where would they come from? Why would we be thinking that? Because these two passage tombs and all the art that surrounds them were created 2,500 to 3,000 years before Christ, making them older than the Egyptian pyramids. Newgrange is the largest of these two passage tombs, and it was built by Stone Age farmers. The mound is 279 feet in diameter and 43 feet high, covering about an acre of land. The structure is unique for its roof box over the entrance, designed to catch the rays of the rising sun for just 6 days surrounding the winter equinox. Mind you, Stone Age folks building this. On those 6 days, the perfect alignment of this box captures the sun's light, traveling the connected 62-foot long passage to a center cruciform type room to light it with natural light. It's the only time in the year that occurs. If you visit, they will set you up so they can simulate that. You stand in the cruciform room 62 feet into this massive natural structure, and then they turn on a light at the roof box, and you get a sense of that. The mounds of both Newgrange and Knowth were constructed in such a way that to this day they remain waterproof and dry. They've had things built on top of them and then been rediscovered, and lots of things have happened over time. Right now they look like huge mounds of earth with grass on the top and these curbstones around them and one little entrance to go in. But think of the testament to the builders who were using materials that weren't native to the area. I don't know where they don't know where the stones came from or whatever, but they built structures that have lasted all this time, 5,000 years. And they're still tight, built of layers of stone and earth and so on and so forth. The people who built them lived in thatch and stick huts, so all of the good stuff apparently went to the passage tombs. And they lived an average of 30 years. It's estimated that each of these passage tombs took more than 60 years to create. So these are people who are invested in building this phenomenal structure that will last for thousands of years, but they will never see the end of it. They speculate that it may have been some type of timekeeping or religious thing. I invite you to look them up when you get home and take a look at the pictures of them. But imagine that they would invest such time and energy and create such art around it to last for centuries and never be able to see it themselves. So each of these stories begins with what's already there, raw materials, a hole in the ground, and nudges those present toward what is to come, the patience to wait for a geyser, the certainty that what they were building would stand for years on end, even if they did not see it. One of these examples of faith is far simpler than the other, but both require preparation and a willingness to engage in faith, right? Faith is what we dare to do when we believe that God's already got our back, succeeding or failing, and simply asks us to begin, whether Stone Age builders or tourists standing watch, on faith that Old Faithful will indeed continue to erupt. And if we return to this morning's opening reading, Abraham enters into the not yet life of faith as he pulls up stakes and moves his family across a continent. He knows it's not going to be smooth sailing, this life with God. He knows that in his heart, and yet he goes. And he fails at times spectacularly. And we know that Jesus' followers did too, experiencing multiple setbacks and disappointments, and yet they too committed in faith, knowing they might not see the whole of their efforts on this earthly plane, and yet here we are. They took hold of what was already there, God's gifts, God's presence within them, and lived into the not yet uncertainty of their earthly lives. The slaves of today's passage engaged in the already. They're active and engaged and alert, with their lamps lit, willing to steward a house they do not possess, ready for anything as they wait on the not yet of a promise to be fulfilled, because regardless of any perceived destination, they believe that anything could and was and is already happening. Consider these closing thoughts inspired by Hope by Steve Garnis Holmes, who says, faith is not that God will intervene and make things better or speed things up or fix the problems. Faith is that love is at work already. Despite the things that discourage us, this world is born of goodness. Grace flourishes even in bad places, and love holds us in aching but untired arms. Even the way is not yet well lit. We can live in faith. Amen and amen. I invite you to join us